Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I don't even know what time it is, what day it is, where we are. Welcome, regardless, whether it's morning or afternoon. My name is Leah Hinds. I'm the Executive Director of the Charleston Hub, and I'd like to welcome you to our session today, Charleston Trendspotting Initiative, Forecasting the Future. This is something that's a very special session that's near and dear to my heart. We've been doing this for a few years now. But for those of you who maybe have never attended or are first-timers or aren't familiar with the conference, just a bit of background. The Charleston Conference was founded in 1980 by Katina Strout. At the time, she was a newly hired collection development librarian here at the College of Charleston. She didn't have a travel budget to go attend meetings, so she invited a group of thought leaders to come here to Charleston and meet with her. It started out in a classroom with about 20 to 25 people and has grown to what we see today, over 3 venues with over 2,000 attendees. And it's just been a wonderful thing that she has started here with the library community. And the Trendspotting Initiative, oops, I skipped 2 slides, is a community-engaged process to cooperatively and collaboratively explore social, policy, economic, technology, and educational trends. So that's a lot of words. We're identifying the trends and the issues that are coming down the pipes for libraries and publishers and the scholarly communications industry. And then we try to take a look to forecast the impacts of what those trends are and how they're going to affect us in the future. The initiative was established in 2018. It came out of a conversation with Katina and some conference attendees who stressed the importance of being proactive rather than reactive, to take a proactive look ahead, see what's coming, rather than wait for it to come to you. So we've had several versions of this since 2018. The current version is the Trend Lab. It's a group forum, which you are all here today to participate in, to discuss the potential impacts of trends on the information industry and scholarly communications. So we're very excited to have you all here today to participate, to have a conversation, and to learn more, to learn from each other about what's happening in our industry. Today's agenda, we're in the welcome and introduction portion of the show. So up next, Lisa will be doing Futures Thinking 101. She'll drill down into some specifics about what we're talking about, what we mean when we say futures thinking. Then we're going to do an activity called a Futures Wheel activity that Lisa will explain more about. That's the paper and the markers and the Post-it notes that we have for group activities. Then we'll do small group reporting back to the large group and wrap up from there. So we have an hour, had a lot to get covered in an hour. So I'm going to turn things over to Lisa. She is the Trend Lab Director. You know her from frequent speaking and publishing and consulting in our industry, and I thank her for her hard work on this project. Thank you, Lisa.
That applause really goes to Leah as well. So I'm Lisa Janicki Hinchliffe. I'm a professor and the coordinator for research and teaching professional development at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Between my name, my job title, and my institutional title is like a whole agenda item. It has been really a pleasure to work with Katina and Leah on designing this series that we've now done. I guess this technically, if it's 5 years, this is number 10. Yeah, so futures thinking is an interesting thing. A lot of times we kind of feel like the future is, like, when is the future, right? It's at some point, not now, except now, right? Okay, so we're kind of trying to push out a little bit further than just like the immediate next minute. But we also recognize that we cannot specifically predict the future. But the reality is we can observe, and we all have experiences that allow us to sort of see how things might develop and then to assess likelihood and probability of those potential futures. So it's very key that you notice that it is not future thinking, it is futures thinking. So we're thinking about multiple possible futures. So I really love this quote from, it's an OECD project that was actually about the schools of tomorrow, like the K-12 schools of tomorrow. Futures thinking offers us ways of addressing, even helping to shape the future. It's not about gazing into a crystal ball. It illuminates the way that policy, strategy, and actions can promote desirable futures and help prevent those that we consider undesirable. So this is one of the key things that we can sort of say, well, here's what could come to be. Do we like that thing? Then we try and foster it. If we don't like it, no time like today to intervene and take us off that path that we might be on. So the idea is to stimulate strategic dialogue, widen our understanding of what is possible, strengthen leadership, and inform our decision making. So even though sometimes people feel it's like really pie in the sky thinking, the ultimate goal is to inform the decisions we make today, because the decisions we make today are the things that are going to impact the future we have tomorrow. So our goal in this Trend Lab is to identify, assess, and maybe even today shape the way that our systems and relationships will develop over time. To do that, we need careful and thoughtful analysis of our current conditions, pressures on the system, risks, resources, and potential implications of current trends. And I think we could even think to our keynote panel this morning and think about how many things that were discussed might be some of those current conditions, pressures on the system, current risks, potential implications. Our process reveals potential futures. It does not predict a particular future. And what that lets us do is to develop strategies, policies, and actions that move us in the direction of the desirable futures while also avoiding undesirable futures. Now, of course, one of the challenges with this is that what I consider desirable, somebody else might consider undesirable. So it also creates space for us to have a dialogue about, if you will, a compromise future that we could both find desirable. Our ultimate goal is purposeful action to increase the probability, plausibility, and feasibility of desired futures. So whatever we'd like to see happen, of what could happen, how do we support that and make it more likely? Now, I want to give a caveat here. A very common mistake in futures thinking is to conflate our values and theories about how the world should work with how the world currently is. Which is not to say that we should set aside and ignore the fact that we have values and beliefs. Those will inform our judgments about what is desirable, but we must work within reality. So we have to truly understand the conditions we are in, because if we do not, and we work only around what we wish was, we can actually inadvertently end up smoothing a path to something that's undesirable, because we aren't working within reality. So we don't want to decrease the likelihood of the desired futures by failing to consider what is reality today. And if you've read any of my pieces on the Scholarly Kitchen, a number of them are about this exact thing of unintended consequences that happen from not dealing with reality. So, there's a lot of different techniques. There's, not surprisingly, a whole encyclopedia of futures thinking tools. And so one of the fun things that we do each year is pick one of those tools to practice with. We're going to practice at this conference with something that's called the Futures Wheel. One of the things I just want to sort of meta highlight for a moment here is this is a technique, as have all of them, that you could bring back into your own organization. You can take my slides and you can run this exercise with your colleagues at your own institution, which, makes it a little bit more concrete. So our challenge here today is we're going to be a little heterogeneous. And we don't have a particular organization that we're planning for, right? We have to kind of take this big picture. When you take this into a specific library or a specific publisher, you can meld this with your own mission, goals, priorities, etc. So what is the Futures Wheel? Could you hand me my water? So the Futures Wheel is a structured brainstorming technique that results in a visual method of exploring consequences. it is centered on a specific change or trend. So we choose a trend, we use a structured brainstorming approach, and we create a visual map. This is a very idealized version of one. We put our trend or event in the middle of our piece of paper, and then we either draw, or I prefer, use one color Post-it note for the first ring of consequences. Because this happened, this could happen. Because this trend or event, this could happen. Because this trend or event, that could happen. So I draw one ring of potential consequences. And we can use a lot of techniques here, like, well, what do librarians think will happen? What do publishers think will happen? What does a foreign entity think will happen? I mean, depending on the topic. And then you say, okay, that's the change that's in the middle. And this is the first order effect. This is the first set of consequences. And then for each one of those consequences, we ask ourselves again, well, if that consequence happened, what would happen? And we get to our second order effects. Okay? So as I said, this is an idealized version. So now I want to show you one that's actually a little messier in the sense of how the real world would be. We've got our change in the middle, and this particular activity was done around, we're taking a 20% budget cut. This also used to feel like a very fictitious example, and those of us living in higher ed, this might be just a little too close to home right now, but like, what is going to happen if we take a 20% budget cut? And so in this particular one, I realize it's a little hard to see, but it says, well, we're gonna have problems with morale. You think? We're gonna have to make our sales staff travel economy. We're gonna be unable to invest in IT. We're not gonna be able to send anyone to external training, and we're not gonna be able to hire new staff. And then for each one of those, you can see the second order effect in green. Apparently, problems with morale just becomes its own, like, it just is. But like, no external training results in people having fewer new skills, problems with morale, and more internal training is going to be needed. And if we need more internal training, we're going to have to do that. And you see they actually went to third order effect, to skill sharing and on-the-job training. It turns out that many of these things result in problems with morale. So one of the things we can see is across this, we can start to say, oh, look, kind of no matter which thing happens, this thing keeps showing up. That means it's pretty probable. If it shows up no matter what pathway we're on, it's pretty probable. Now, in this one, there's no positives, apparently, of taking a 10% or 20% cut. Not terribly surprising, but not even, no one brainstormed like, oh, it would challenge us to innovate and realign our priorities, right? Or something slightly positive. It's really good if not everything is doom and gloom, right? Sometimes changes that happen are opportunities. So one, for example, that I think we could put in the middle of our Trendspotting Futures Wheel map, like we could take the Nelson OSTP memo. It's an event that is going to create a lot of change. And we can even, on this case, we can be like, well, here's stuff that we already know happened, right? And then what's gonna happen because of it. But the OSTP memo is not all positive or negative for anyone in this room, I don't think. There's probably some downsides, some upsides. So we wanna also balance and ask ourselves what good could come out of this, what negatives could come out of this. So the process we do is you choose a change or a trend for your central focus. This tells you that when you get to the workshop part, who you're sitting with might matter. Obviously, something that's important to your company or your library is going to be important and common. So I'm going to ask you here today to just have a little grace with each other, to sort of choose something that you all generally have in common or can think about, and not be too hung up on whether it's specifically the most important thing for your company or your library. If you were doing it in your workplace you would choose a trend or change that's like really causing a lot of disruption in your organization. And then you're going to identify those direct or first order effects, positive and negative, and then second order or indirect consequences. And you can go to third and fourth, however far you want to go. After you get that map, you sort of need to assess it all and synthesize and how far you get with this, don't panic, right? We're doing an abbreviated process. But like, could you synthesize overall what you're seeing and say, what of this looks desirable? What of this maybe not so desirable? And if you get so far, you could even say, and what would we do to either make the desirable more likely? And what could we do to avoid the undesirable? Okay? So at your tables, you've got Post-it notes. You've got multiple colors. Feel free to horse trade with other people with other colors. You also have markers if you just want to write on the pieces of paper. We have more paper if your wheel gets really big, it's fine. So just to toss out a few things that you could do. I already mentioned the OSTP memo. I would encourage you, if you do that, to focus on maybe a sub part of it, like the public access mandate, the open data mandate, the metadata requirements, because there's really 3 components of it. We have the European Union's statement on that they are looking to create an environment in which scholarly publishing happens on non-commercial platforms. Okay, so if you're really into European policy, that's like all the rage there right now, which is publishing on not-for-profit platforms. You could choose something like the big Wiley Hindawe retractions that happened, hundreds and hundreds of articles earlier this year. You could choose something like the STM Research Integrity Hub. Now that we have that hub, what would be the implications? You could do the NIH data policy. I mean, there's infinite number of things. Those are just some. So at your table, you might want to have just a reflective, quick time of what are the big issues or changes or trends that you'd like to do. I will say when we did this at SSP, 5 of the 7 tables, I think, did AI. If you choose AI, please choose a more focused, generative AI or ChatGPT or something, just to give yourself a little bit more limits to your conversation. And then you're gonna first order consequences, second order consequences, etc. However far you want to go. Synthesize those implications, evaluate the desirability of those implications, and identify any actions to shape those implications. So just to give you a heads up as well of what we're going to ask some of the small groups to share, because I know a lot of, at least librarians, we really like to know what the roadmap is. We're not going to ask you to share everything. We'll have a few groups share what change or trend you selected, one significant implication, and if you got to it, an action to influence that implication. So before I turn you over to the craft supplies and the groups, are there any questions about our next 20 minutes together? Okay, so we want to hear from a few of the groups. Leah will bring the mic to you. If anyone is not paying attention to me at all. This is great. It really says it's a good conversation, so one hesitates to disrupt, but it is one's job to do so. So we want to hear a little bit back from at least a couple of the groups, sort of the change or trend that you talked about, maybe a significant implication, and if you got to something that we might collectively do to influence that implication. So is there any group that's willing to break the ice? Okay, great. This group down in front.
I'm bringing the mic to you.
So we are a great group because we have a museum library, an R1 large research state university library, a vendor, a metrics vendor, a law library, and a publisher. So we are really representative. Our trend that we identified is, as a statement, the OA landscape becomes increasingly complex and murky. As a first-order effect from that, we identified increasingly difficult to track usage. What does usage even mean in that landscape? How do you define it? How do you track it? How do you begin to do that? And then as a possible outcome or way to shape that would be to have the conversations around rethinking what usage means, rethinking what you are trying to measure and why. Anything else? So, all right.
Okay, not bad for 20 minutes. Not bad.
Thank you.
Good job. Yay. Another group? Oh, right over here on the left. Right over here on the left. That's not confusing at all.
We'll try to be pretty fast. We were talking about AI specific to use in the classroom, and you thought that would be tight, but we went all over the place, and I think we had so many great thoughts from a pretty diverse group. Without getting into like all of the obvious things, I thought one of the things that was really great that came out of the conversation, we hear a lot about how there's a lot of bias in AI, but we actually found that lots of consequences led to a lot of equity as a result of AI, both because it could help with the translation of materials, it could serve as a tutor to students who wouldn't otherwise have access to tutoring, and there was another area where we had equity, people with different backgrounds, including the idea that not everyone's a great writer, but that AI can help them actually communicate their ideas in a way that, for instance, science can be more speedily and rapidly disseminated through the use of AI, where writing can sometimes be a real blockade for people who aren't naturally great writers. So I thought it was fascinating that equity, where we hear so much about bias, that we came up with more ideas around equity. Did I talk about us well? Yeah.
So. Yeah, interesting. Interesting how you kind of see the implications and you could start synthesizing them together. Let's give this team a round of applause as well. Bill.
Well, our trend was the diminishing importance of the formally published scholarly article to researchers, which is actually happening. A lot of people around the table went, what? Yeah.
Good. I asked you to deal in reality, so yes. Good job.
Yeah. So all kinds of interesting consequences. First of all, increase importance of other modes of research communication. Excellent. And other media of research communication, et cetera, than the final formally published article. Obvious change to tenure evaluation, because so much of it now depends on that. Change in, you help me with a few others here, guys. Pace of research speeds up because it gets communicated along the way rather than just after everything is done and a year later your article is finally published. What? Oh yeah, research integrity issues. There's less formal guardrails available compared to what a formal peer-reviewed article has to pass by, et cetera. And more visibility of negative results, which often don't get published in the formal literature. So there's a few.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, team. Thank you. So in our final moments, we also like to always ask if anyone has any just reflection or observation on the particular tool or technique that we used, and how, if it's something that you think you would use in other settings, or just, it's a very big picture kind of question, so.
What was the book you referenced, the encyclopedia?
I would have, this bad librarian does not have the full citation in front of her, so it's either the Encyclopedia of Futures Thinking or the Handbook of Futures Thinking, but I'm Lisa Librarian on all social media and Gmail. So if you don't find it immediately, just email me and I'll be happy to shoot you back a direct link to the website. Oh, okay, great. So it stimulated some good thoughts and approach, and in the group setting. Yeah, there's something about doing this in a group that's really different dynamic. Yeah, great.
Do we have other groups to report back, or are we running out of time?
Oh, sorry, the clock here and the real clock well, we have 2 minutes, Leah. Yeah. So
one more group?
Pick one more person either to share a thought or to a group to report out?
Any volunteers?
Oh, way in the back.
Aha.
Catherine.
I felt like I kept phrasing them as action items. So I don't know if that's the activity or me, but it was a good exercise, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. So got to some action items. That's great. That's great. All right. Well, let me wrap up here today. We invite you to join us for the next Trend Lab, which will take place as part of the collaboration between SSP and Charleston. So we plan to have a session at the 2024 SSP conference. I see Melanie in the room back here, so she would probably even remind us where that conference is going to be, since I failed to put it on the slide. Boston. So we're back to Boston. I understand the call for proposals is still open for one more week as well, so let me add that on behalf of SSP as well. It's always a great time, and we'd love to have you back with us at SSP and then at Charleston 2024 as well. Oh, one more. Oh, what's SSP? Great question. I love that somebody's willing to ask the question. It's a Society for Scholarly Publishing. And Melanie, if you want to raise your hand again, is the executive director. If you want to ask any questions, she does calibrate well to how much you actually want to know. So, great. All right, Leah, it's been great as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.